What comes to mind when you think of an ancient Roman? A legionary in segmented armor, a senator in a flowing toga. Chances are you're not picturing them in a pair of pants. And for good reason. For a long time, the Romans didn't just not wear pants. They actively despised them. But why? Why did one of the most powerful empires in history look at a pair of trousers and say, absolutely not? Well, the answer is a fascinating mix of culture, climate, and a little bit of snobbery. To the Romans, clothing was a powerful symbol. It told everyone who you were, where you came from, and your status in society. Their go-to garments, the tunic and the toga, were considered the uniform of a civilized person. They were practical for the Mediterranean climate, breezy, comfortable, and easy to make. The toga in particular was a status symbol. It was a large, cumbersome piece of wool that you couldn't do much manual labor in, so wearing one was basically a way of saying, I'm so important. I don't need to work with my hands. Now, who did wear pants? The people the Romans considered barbarians. Think of the Gauls, the Germans, the Persians, peoples from colder northern climates. For them, trousers, or bracca, as the Romans called them, were a practical necessity. They offered protection from the cold and were ideal for riding horses, which was a central part of their cultures. So, for a Roman, putting on a pair of pants was like admitting you were one of them. It was seen as uncivilized, effeminate, and foreign. Roman writers like Tacitus and Seneca the Younger mocked barbarians for their leg coverings, seeing it as a sign of their wild, untamed nature. It was a clear line in the sand. We wear togas and tunics. They wear trousers. It was a cultural identifier as strong as language or religion. Wearing pants in Rome would have been a major social faux pas, like wearing a swimsuit to a formal dinner party. You just didn't do it. But here's where the story gets interesting. Empires expand, and as Rome pushed its borders further north into colder territories like Britain and Germany, reality started to set in. The Roman soldiers, shivering in their standard issue tunics, began to look at the locals' warm, practical trousers with a bit of envy. At first, it was a slow, unofficial adoption. Legionaries, stationed on the cold frontiers, started wearing leather or wool leggings under their tunics for warmth. They were practical, and when you're freezing on Hadrian's Wall, you care a lot less about fashion statements from back in sunny Rome. This was purely a military adaptation, a practical solution to a practical problem. It was still seen as something soldiers did out of necessity, not something a respectable citizen in the capital would ever consider. Then, the Emperor Trajan's campaigns in Dacia, modern-day Romania, became a turning point. On Trajan's Column in Rome, a massive monument celebrating his victory, you can see something shocking. Roman soldiers are clearly depicted wearing trousers. These weren't just simple leggings. They were full-on trousers tucked into their boots. This was a huge public acknowledgement that pants were now part of the Roman military uniform, at least in the colder parts of the empire. This military adoption slowly started to chip away at the old prejudice. Soldiers would return to Rome after their service, bringing their new clothing habits with them. What was once seen as barbaric was now associated with the bravery and toughness of the Roman army. The perception was beginning to shift. It was no longer just barbarian clothing. It was soldier clothing. As the empire continued to evolve, so did its people. By the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, the Roman Empire was a very different place. It was more diverse, with emperors coming from provinces like Illyria and Africa. The influence of barbarian cultures, particularly Germanic and Gallic ones, became much more pronounced, not through conquest, but through integration. Many of these groups were serving in the Roman army and even rising to high positions of power. With them, they brought their customs and, you guessed it, their clothing. Trousers started appearing more and more frequently, not just on soldiers, but on civilians as well. The old cultural stigma began to fade. The practicality of pants, especially for horse riding, which was becoming more common throughout the empire, was undeniable. In fact, the tide turned so completely that by the late 4th century, some Roman traditionalists were getting worried. They saw the adoption of trousers and other barbarian fashions, like long hair and fur coats, as a sign of cultural decay. In 397 AD, the emperors Honorius and Arcadius actually issued a Lothar dress edict that explicitly banned the wearing of trousers and boots within the city of Rome. Think about that for a second. The very garment they once scorned as barbaric had become so popular that they had to pass a law to try and stop people from wearing it. The law was an attempt to preserve the Romanness of the capital, to hold onto the old symbol of the toga. But it was like trying to hold back the tide. The ban was largely unenforceable and eventually forgotten. The practicality and comfort of trousers had won. By the time the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, trousers were commonplace. The old distinction between the tunic-wearing Roman and the trouser-wearing barbarian had completely dissolved. In the new kingdoms that emerged in Europe, the Franks, the Goths, the Anglo-Saxons, trousers were the standard male garment. So, the story of why the Romans didn't wear pants is really a story of how they started to wear pants. It's a fantastic example of how cultures aren't static. They adapt, they borrow, and they change. What was once a symbol of a foreign other became a practical solution for soldiers, and eventually a common fashion for everyone. It shows us that even the most powerful empires can't resist a good practical idea forever, even if it comes in the form of a simple pair of pants. Thank you so much for watching. It's a great reminder that the clothes we wear have a deep and often surprising history. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the fascinating details of the past. Let me know in the comments what other historical questions you'd like to see answered. See you next time.